All right, so I'm totally just doing this off the cuff this morning. And as you know, most of my videos don't really I don't go into a lot of planning for them anyway. So, but I have been working on a project that I hope to release some footage on soon. And what that project is I did a video on a Goodwill find ARXA last year on the channel, maybe the year before. I've kind of lost track of when these videos were released. And I worked on that AR, and it was either the XA, I think it was the XB. So let me take a step back. I had this Goodwill find ARXA. I wanted to work on an AR, so I kind of repaired that one. I didn't really restore it and anymore. The terms are almost interchangeable. I took it from a piece of junk to something that was decent and that you could listen to. And after I was finished with that ARXA, I kind of made the comment I didn't understand the big deal about ARs. I bought an XB because I always wanted an XB because it has the tone arm elevator. And I did a video series on the XB, and at the end of that series, I still kind of came away thinking, what's the big deal about these turntables? Well, as you can see, I have an ARXB in front of me. I have an ARXA to the right of me, and from the carcass of the ARXB, and if you watch that video, you'll see that I had a plinth and it was trashed, and I had to get a new plinth. So anyway, I had this carcass in my garage, and I thought, I don't want that to go to waste, so I'm going to rebuild it, right? So I made a plinth for it. I'm going through that right now. I need to find some parts for it, so it may be a while before it's released, but I have grown extremely fond of AR turntables. So what I thought I would do in this review video is talk about the ARXA and XB together, talk about the differences between the two. I won't have a lot of detailed information because I haven't done any research. I'm just going to go by memory. So my dates aren't going to be real specific, and what, maybe what they go for or what they went for back in the day may not be real specific, but I do just in general want to talk about the turntables. So you're looking at the ARXB. So because I'm kind of an OCD person at times, and there's my Thorens TD125. I want to start with this ARXA. Now, this is a modified ARXA. I do have an ARXA that is unmolested. I will try to maybe include a picture of that at some point. Get my camera set up. But this is an ARXA. Now, this is a modified ARXA. If you look really closely, I didn't have to. I chose to replace the tone arm with a Technics turntable tone arm. Didn't shoot any video on it. It's the first time I did it. And I'll be honest with you, I just decided to do it one day. Didn't even have my camera set up or anything like that. So on this ARXA, I replaced the tone arm so I could swap out head shells. Naturally, when you do that, you have to put new tone arm wires in. This has, it doesn't have the original motor, so this is a 2-motor unit. I may get a little bit closer and talk to you about that here in a minute. But I did have to convert this to a 1-motor unit because the 2-motor units, it's hard to find that original motor and have it run it in that configuration, I guess, because you can't find the motor, if that makes any sense. So this is modified. I'm going to get a badge for this one and the other one I'm working on, and I don't know, just kind of make it look a little bit more presentable. But this is the ARXA. So what's special about the ARXA and XB? What I love about them is their simplicity. So AR turntables, they were manufactured and sold from the early to mid 60s, and I'm just talking about the XA and the XB, to about the mid 70s, maybe the late 70s. Again, I'm kind of going by memory, and they had other turntable models like the one called the AR turntable, and things like that. So my dates aren't going to be real precise, but you're talking from roughly the mid 60s to the mid 70s. And these were budget turntables. They were really inexpensive. I think the list price was around $75. I've seen $72 to $78, plus or minus a couple of bucks, I would assume. But you can't get any more basic than an AR turntable. However, they incorporated some brand new design elements that were subsequently, I believe, copied. Now again, I may get this wrong, I'm not an AR historian, but they may have been copied by other turntable manufacturers, like to a certain respect, Lynn and Thorens, like a Thorens TD160 or 165 has a very similar setup. And what makes these unique is the platter, right, and the tone arm. They basically are a part of one suspended system underneath that uses a T-brace. Thorns is similar. My TD125 is a little bit different, but like if I had a 160 or 165, I could show you, and maybe I'll flash up maybe the bottom of an AR and then contrast that with the bottom of a Thorns to show you the suspension system similarities. But this is basically a motor, a plinth, and a tone arm. And with this floating, right, platter and tone arm, you have near perfect vibration isolation. Now, I know you may not be able to tell this, but I have the ARXA sitting on a speaker and the ARXB sitting on a speaker. The ARXB has a record on it because unlike just about any other turntable, and certainly any turntable that I own, other than the ARs, I can listen at really loud volume, right? I can listen to a record on the speaker where the sound is coming from. The vibration isolation is that good. Like normally, if you put a turntable on a speaker and you're listening to the turntable, you're going to get feedback. You're going to get, the tone arm is going to pick up the vibration not only from the record but from the speaker. These are so good at vibration isolation that I can listen to these on these speakers, and it's just freaking amazing to me. So what makes these special? It's all about the suspension, right? How we can do that, it's all about the suspension. And again, you saw in the images, hopefully, that I flashed up about the suspension underneath and the springs. You can tune the springs. You can buy stiffer springs. You can make it real spongy, or you can make it real stiff. You can level the platter through the manipulation of the spring suspension underneath. I mean, they're just great turntables. The way they work is, so here's just a cheap cork mat, like $10 off of Amazon. And then you have, right, an outer ring for the platter, and you have an inner ring. Now again, as I referenced, this one is a 2 motor that I actually converted to a 1 motor, right? So there's a motor here, and what this motor does is it makes sure that the turntable spins in the proper direction. So this gets kind of this motor started, if you want to look at it that way. But again, this has a motor that has enough torque and it will spin in the right direction to where this is no longer needed. But there would be a second belt that would wrap around that and make that work. So the ARXA, the styling is mid-century modern. They're iconic. I probably flashed up some specs on this. I haven't looked them up myself. Now, to do a speed change to go from 33 to 45, I don't know if you noticed on the spindle, but there were 2 grooves. The smaller groove is for 33, the larger groove is for 45. So to change the speed, you have to take the platter off, and that's kind of the only downside to these. Now, the ARXA, there's no tone arm elevator, so you've got to be, you're manually doing it. You've got to be real precise. Now, to support the use of the Technics tone arm and slightly taller head shells, I actually took the tone arm like pivot post, and I'm using that because it's taller than the stock ARXA. So this is actually from an XB, right? This post right here, because it sits up higher. And then normally on an ARXA, they have a mechanism to where the tone arm is damped. So there's a barrel in there, and you use some silicone damping oil, and then there's a little Darlin washer on the end of this post, and you can kind of sort of adjust the damping. But what it does is when you move the tone arm over, if you were to drop it, it slows the descent down so you won't damage your stylus. Right now I have no protection on this at all because I have a component from the XB, and this post, the part that connects to the tone arm pivot up here is just flat. On the XA, it's round. It's like a barrel, and there's an inner sleeve and outer sleeve. I'll try to snap a picture of that. But most people, because there's a little felt washer that kind of makes that damping system work, that felt washer after 60 years has disintegrated, and it's really hard to find a replacement to get the damping to work the way it should. So most AR folks will tell you just to remove the damping. Like, you don't need the damping. So, but I've removed it because I'm using a different post. So the ARXA, it's real basic. Here's the on-off switch. You just turn it on, you put the needle on the record, and you go. I mean, it's fantastic, right? And again, the vibration isolation is outstanding, absolutely outstanding. So that was the XA. The XB, what's the difference between the two? And again, I was listening to this record this morning, and it was loud. I mean, I thought for sure I was going to get feedback. I was kind of pushing it to try to get some feedback. And basically, it got to the point where the volume was too loud, and I didn't want to bother my neighbors. And it was too loud for me. Now, this has an aftermarket dust cover. This is from J&B Audio. These dust covers run about $175. I'm going to pick one up for the XA that I just showed you. This fits both plinths very well, but you just lift it off, set it to the side. Right, so this has the traditional AR head shell, kind of a goofy design, just plastic. You can buy aftermarket replacements from Pat's Audio. This one does have a tone arm elevator, right? So you can guide it down. And the damping is controlled through the actual elevator itself, right? Unlike on the XA, it's actually damped through where the tone arm, right, meets that tone arm support, that pivot. On-off switch is here. Now, one thing about AR turntables, the motor is always going to run even in the off position. Now, not spin, but if you plug it into power and you put your hand on the pulley, you'll feel like a vibration. Like the motor's just kind of like waiting to go, which it essentially is, right? So there's AC that's going to it. So it's a best practice to connect the power to the receiver, right? The switched outlet on the back of a receiver or an outlet strip, to where you don't always have that just kind of waiting to go. When the capacitor that runs across the power switch fails, sometimes it won't turn off. I had to do that to the XA. I had to put a new, what was it? It was like a 0.047 microfarad, 600 volt, basically a safety cap. Once I replaced that, the power switch worked just fine. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind. So I would turn it on and it would spin right now, but I don't have the receiver turned on. But the same suspension, right? Same suspension. Now these were all single motor, so you didn't have that second motor to make sure it was going in the right direction. There are different motors you can buy. There were different manufacturing variations depending upon when you bought an XA or an XB. You may have a tall pulley for the motor, you may have a short pulley for the motor, you may have a real small pulley based upon the motor that's in it. So there's a little bit of variation in what you pick up, right, when you're grabbing one of these, depending on when it was made. But really, the XA and the XB, they're identical except for the damping, how it's damped, and then you have the tone arm elevator on the XB. But it's equally as good, right? And the XA has a cult following, so I thought, well, let's get an XB because you have this handy tone arm elevator, which I really love to use. And there you go. Now, in terms of things to look out for on these, if you were thinking about picking one up, you know, I would say that you want to see as many pictures as possible and figure out if it's a 1 motor or a 2 motor. Figure out if it has an original motor, if it's running. Finding motors for these isn't particularly difficult unless it's the 2 motor unit and you want to keep it stock. That old motor, to find one that's working, they weren't real reliable long term. To find one of those old motors working can be a little difficult because I went through it with the XA and I couldn't find one. So I went with just a single motor with a mounting bracket basically. And that worked just fine. On the XA, you know, make sure it has the counterweight for the tone arm. Make sure it has a head shell. Now, one thing about the head shells on these when they're stock, and I'm going to be real careful here, is this one's a little tight, which is good. Right? If you look at the head shell, let me see if I can get that. See those little nubs? Those are plastic and they're brittle, and you can strip those off really easily. The way it goes into the tone arm is there's a plastic barrel here. These break really easily. So if you're looking at one of these, make sure this is complete and you have this little flange at the end. And then that goes back in there. And again, you got to be careful because you don't want to strip those off. You don't want to over tighten it because you can just break those little plastic nubs off of there. So head shell, status of the end of the tone arm, really important. You know, completeness, counterweight, and you know, on the AR that I'm working on in the garage, the XB or the carcass, it's missing this little cap that goes on the tone arm elevator, and it just is threaded and screws on. I need to measure this and see if I can find something that will work in its place, because I don't know that I'll find one of those on eBay unless I buy another, you know, carcass or something, and I feel obligated to like rebuild these things. I don't like using parts when I don't, you know, I'm just kind of goofy that way. So definitely completeness, make sure everything is there. Dust covered. The dust covers on these weren't great. So if you find one with a dust cover, awesome. If you don't, just know that you can buy a J&B Audio cover. I don't get anything from them. This is one that I purchased personally. They're great. They're great dust covers, and they just make them look really, really nice. So in terms of, you know, what to look for, those are the things that I would look for. Condition of the plinth. Now this is vinyl wrapped on the XB. On the XA, it's a little bit crooked. On the XA, it's wood veneer press board, particle board, and the ones that I've come across had some moisture damage and damage to the veneer, so they're not real robust. I'm making a plinth for the XB that I'm working out of mahogany. It's my first time doing something like that, so it's not going to be real precise, but you know, it is the first time. So I think that's it in terms of what to look for. Now, you know, as far as price goes, what can you expect to pay for an XA or an XB? Well, I've noticed XBs go for a little bit more money, and I'm completely like spitballing this here, but I have found the 4-part or not working units that I have picked up for less than $150 shipped. Now, because I've gone through 4 or 5 of these at this point, I've picked up some with dust covers, without dust covers, with dust covers in good condition, with dust covers in horrible condition, with plinths that were solid, with plinths that were, and when I say solid, in good condition, plinths that were complete basket cases. But I have not paid more than, I think, $150 to $175 shipped for the ARs that I have purchased. Now you can find them out on eBay, and I'll flash up, you know, the what is someone thinking price. You know, at the time of this video, it could be $5 or $6 or $7 or $8 or $900, which is absolutely insane for one of these as good as they are. To get one for parts, $150. To get one that's working, I would say stay in that $200 to $250 range. to get one of these that, you know, museum piece out of the box, there are no scratches to the dust cover or the top plate, which is common, you know, because if you think about it, when the platter's spinning, if something happens to where it makes contact with the top plate here, it's going to scratch it, right? So I'm talking like a pristine, perfect condition, box manuals, all the setup gauges and things like that. Easily $350 to $400, but I don't know that I would pay much more than $400. It would have to be like it just rolled off the assembly line type. There's one out on Reverb today. It says new old stock, and I think it's $900. I'm like, new old, not for $900. Maybe $500, but I'm cheap. Maybe $500. So that's kind of what you can expect. I don't see, especially if you aren't afraid to modify or tinker or work on something like this, whether it's woodworking or it's, you know, rewiring a tone arm or you know, putting a new motor in it, or, you know, just tricking one of these out. If you're not intimidated by doing that, I don't see any reason for you to spend more than that $150, maybe $200 to get yourself into it, and then you can modify it and spend money on your modifications. That's kind of what I would recommend for most people. If you're scared to do that kind of stuff, then naturally I would say buy whatever you can afford in the best working condition that you can afford. But again, you can get one of these super cheap and just, you know, make it really nice. For example, if I move back over here on this, I'm going to grab this dust cover. The dust cover, I believe, is compatible with all AR XAs and Bs. So this should fit right on here just fine, right? Right? It's a gorgeous turntable. You know, spend $20-30 on a little emblem, and this plinth is in perfect condition, or really, really, really good condition, I should say. But you know, beautiful, beautiful turntable, and I can put modern cartridges on it easier. I could put it, you know, this is an Ortofon head shell with an Ortofon red. I'm not an Ortofon fan. I just happen to have it. I like running older carts on these. The XB, I've got like an Audio-Technica 3600, just because I didn't know if I was going to sell that one or keep it. So usually if I'm going to sell it, I put a 3600 on it. So AR turntables, fantastic. Fantastic turntable. I'm a convert. I've been converted to the Church of the AR turntable. Acoustic Research. Phenomenal turntables. Phenomenal turntables. I will be doing a gear review on my Thorns TD125. I will show you one thing that's similar but different. This is more along the lines of a Lin, but on a 160 or 165, the suspension is closer to the AR. On the 125, this whole plate, right? It's a similar concept, but this whole plate is on springs, right? So the thing about the AR is, and if you look at some of the ads, and I've seen a video on YouTube where someone's got like a piece of wood, you can actually pound a nail into the wood, right, on the top here, and no vibration comes through. And again, I ran this on the speaker this morning at a tremendous volume and no feedback, zero feedback. I could not do that with my Thorns TD125. And this is easily worth 5 to 6 to 7 to maybe, when I get this all tricked out, 10 times what I would have spent on this one. Easily. Right? But this one would get a lot of feedback and I couldn't do that. So anyway, I'm rambling now and I just cannot say enough about AR turntables. So let me get the focus back over here. Cannot say enough about these. Fantastic. Don't pass one up, right? Drink the Kool-Aid, get into the AR turntables. You won't regret it, especially if you like tinker and modify things. So enough rambling. As always, if you like what you see, hit like, hit subscribe, and I will catch you in the next video.